Hello and welcome viewers, I am Pia and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. On that note, let's take a look at news making headlines this hour. The United States is pressing Ukraine to accept a peace proposal with Russia. There have been meetings held in Geneva between Marco Rubio and Ukrainian counterparts. An amended 28-point plan has now been drafted. Russia has stated that its air defenses shot down nearly 250 Ukrainian drones during overnight attacks in Taganrog. Strikes damaged 2 apartment buildings, a private home, a college, 2 industrial sites and a kindergarten, killing 1 person and wounding 3 others. US President Donald Trump has held a phone call with Chinese President Xi Jinping. The conversation focused on the Ukraine-Russia war, peace efforts towards ending the war, fentanyl, soybeans, and another focal point was Taiwan. Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi and US President Donald Trump held a phone conversation, which is their first since Takaichi triggered a diplomatic clash with Beijing over comments suggesting Japan could respond militarily to a Chinese attack on Taiwan. A US federal judge has dismissed criminal cases against former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James, ruling that the prosecutor appointed at Trump's urging was illegally installed. Moscow and Beijing are exploring ways to increase Russian oil shipments to China. Russian Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak has emphasized that China currently imports about 1.4 million barrels per day by sea and 900,000 via pipelines. The Trump administration has officially designated the Venezuelan group Cartel de los Soles as a terrorist organization, even though Venezuela has now denied its existence outrightly, claiming that the move is ridiculous. Severe flooding in southern Thailand has killed 13 people and affected nearly 2 million, hitting 9 provinces including Surat Thani, Songkhla and Pattani. Evacuations are underway in low-lying areas like Hatyai, with military and rescue teams deployed. Well, viewers, those were, of course, the headlines and our top focus. Russia now says its air defenses intercepted nearly 250 Ukrainian drones during overnight attacks. The strikes targeted multiple areas, including the port city of Taganrog, where Ukrainian drones caused significant damage. Local officials have reported that 2 apartment buildings, a private residence, a college building, 2 industrial facilities and a kindergarten were hit. 1 person has lost their life and 3 others have been wounded in these attacks. Russian authorities say they are assessing the situation and will decide on response measures. With us on the broadcast is Major General Sudhakarji. He's a geostrategic and defense expert joining us from New Delhi. Thank you so much for taking out time speaking to us on NewsX World. We've, of course, reported this barrage of Ukrainian drones. There were about 200 plus drones that have been shot down by the Russians. Strikes have also taken place in Kiev. There are reports of 2 deaths and 6 people wounded in Ukraine. Even as this back and forth is going on, we've seen a crucial meeting take place yesterday in Abu Dhabi between U.S. Army Secretary Dan Driscoll and Russian officials as well. Now, Driscoll will be meeting with a Ukrainian delegation very, very soon in order to sort of iron out the final aspects, the final elements of the fresh draft that has been prepared by Marco Rubio and the Ukrainians in Geneva. One of the key contentious points was, of course, the ceding of territory. That it seems the Americans have sort of factored in what the Ukrainian concerns are. But I wanted to understand from you, Russia has drawn a red line. That red line is, of course, NATO membership for Ukraine. But if there is, suppose, a NATO-style guarantee that is included in the plan, do you think the Russians will accept it?
No, yeah, I don't. The whole central point of the ceasefire or the peace proposal is what you have just stated. As per my understanding, I don't think I'm wrong. If this is what Russia accepts, well, then the whole proposal actually goes defunct. Russia's main contention has been that Ukraine must stay neutral. It should be a neutral country. It should not become a member of the NATO. So the issue that actually arises is if it doesn't become member of NATO, how can our NATO type assurance of security guarantee be extended? NATO type security guarantee is application of the clause 5,
Yes.
that article 5. And once the article, what does the article 5 says? An attack on any country who is a member of the NATO alliance will be deemed, or it will be taken as an attack on another country. So all of them together will be fighting back. These are the contradictions which need to be ruled out. And because the central point of Putin's or Russia's demand has been, one of the points is that Ukraine should not become member of the NATO. It should continue to remain neutral. It is only then the security guarantee which Russia has been demanding to be assured is going to be fulfilled. This is my understanding. Second point that you are talking of, the ruling or refining the broad outline of the peace proposal in Abu Dhabi, that meeting is taking place. If the people, our viewers, will do well to understand, you see, any meaningful push for peace must take into account at least three dimensions. What are the three dimensions? The first and foremost dimension, as per my understanding, is the reality on the battlefield. If this is understood, what is the reality? Reality is like yesterday, you and me, I think we discussed, is that there are five oblasts. Out of five, three, Crimea, Donetsk, and Luhansk, they have to be deemed and taken as a part of Russia. And when you say that in Donetsk, there is a portion, there is a little portion which is still with Ukraine. Ukraine has to forego, it's around 10 or 15%. They have to forego that and Russia has to take it because Russia is interested in that particular 10% because it rolls down, it dominates. There is a multi-directional kind of a frontage which is opening up. One opening is to the Sumy, another to Kiev, the other one is to Kharkiv. There is another one going towards Dnieper side. These are all, it's like a communication center in military parlance. The other two, which they have taken in for this thing, is Kherson and Zaporizhia. Kherson and Zaporizhia, as per the peace proposal, as is various basis, they will freeze wherever they are. And the portion which is under Russia will continue to remain under Russia. This is the understanding. But the second point that I want to actually highlight is Ukraine's need for credible and lasting security assurance. Now, how does it happen? This is a very tricky issue. How do you provide security assurance to Ukraine without being a member of, if it continues as a neutral member? So therefore, there has to be some kind of a security architecture worked out and some kind of a caveat has to be evolved or developed wherein that even without becoming member of the NATO, it has to be given some kind of a security assurance. The third and most important point that comes to my mind is the creation of a new security framework in Europe. Now, this is the central point.
Yes.
This is what they should have done way back in 1990. Between 1990 till now, almost 35 years have passed by. They have forced the dissolution of the Warsaw Pact countries, the 8 members, which was formed as a counter to NATO, formation of NATO way back in late 50s. NATO came into existence in 1949. So therefore, if you have to ensure that the creation of a new security framework in Europe, what does it mean? It means that between the Eastern Europe and the Central Europe, there has to be along the border, consisting of Romania, you have Poland, this side is Belarus, and it goes on towards the Finland. That complete stretch of border has to have some kind of architecture which will ensure that the sphere of influence of NATO does not expand east of that line. That is the architecture. The other architecture which is required is within the Ukraine itself, what I have explained to you. Kherson, Zaporizhia, the area freezes, wherever they are. Crimea, Donetsk and Luhansk, become an integral part of Russia, if this is what it is, the scaling down of strength we discussed yesterday, Pia, if you recall, from 900,000 it is to scale down its force level in Ukraine has to scale down to 6,000, 600,000, and these are the primary issues. And above all, if you have to actually summarize the entire thing, I think there is the central element which is lacking today, if deficient, is the trust. There is a huge trust deficit. Whether this peace proposal, even after having been accepted, even after the assured security guarantee has been given to Ukraine, will it actually sustain? Will it last? Because this is what was the moot issue because of which Minsk 1 and Minsk 2 accord, 2014 and 2015 on the similar lines, almost on the similar line. Germany, UK, France, they all came together. It was on the final stage of being accepted. But unfortunately, what happened in April, the Prime Minister of UK went rushing. The agreement was supposed to be signed, an exclusive agreement. Turkey was playing a very vital role between Russia and Ukraine to stop the conflict. But he went and said, no, 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 let the conflict go on. So, so whether it will last or not, this is a point where Donald Trump has to actually focus. If he can sustain it at least for 3 to 6 months' time after the peace proposal has been accepted, I think it will be a win-win situation for which Donald Trump and his team, they deserve to be given kudos if they can push it ahead at least for 6 to 9 months. Thereafter, I think it will fall in place.
Absolutely, sir. Requesting you to stay on with us as we're tracking some updates, this time from the United States of America. We're now learning that a federal judge has dismissed criminal charges against James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James, ruling that the U.S. attorney appointed by President Trump to prosecute them was unlawfully installed. Lindsay Halligan, Trump's former personal lawyer, had been named interim U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia despite no prosecutorial experience. Judge Cameron McGowan Curry has found Halligan had no legal authority to bring indictments but dismissed the cases without prejudice, allowing the Justice Department to potentially refile the case. Now, both Comey and Letitia James have condemned the prosecution as a politically motivated. Comey, in fact, called it a reflection of the Justice Department under Trump, while Letitia James has emphasized that she would continue to challenge any further politically motivated charges. With us on the broadcast is Major General Sudhakarji. Interesting developments because this case has been going on for quite a while. The critics are pointing out that Trump is deliberately going after James Comey as well as Letitia James. And now a federal judge has come out and dismissed the charges but has still left the scope open for the case to be refiled. Now we know the Trump administration will not back down. They're likely to, in fact, go through the legal process once again. But to what degree is this a setback for them?
It's a big setback in the court of law. These kind of, appointments, illegal appointments, I would say, technically, legally, it actually doesn't stand the scrutiny of law. So in a case like this, I think Donald Trump would do well and his team. The credibility needs to be restored. As it is, they're taking a huge beating in the political mandate. There is no doubt in this. How can you see, Donald Trump has repeatedly attacked Comey and James, declaring in one social media post, they are all guilty as hell. Donald Trump is not the end all and be all of everything in matters which are judicial in nature.
Yes.
Okay, so he has to respect the law of land. The law of land has got a hierarchy of judiciary. They have district courts, they have the provincial courts, they have got the Supreme Court. So there is a means of representation, petition filing, and for seeking redressal and against the grievances they have. You can't arbitrarily pick up two people and they said you go to hell. It can't be done this way. So, in a country like a superpower like USA, I think it will do him good if he sits back and starts doing pranayam. Pranayam from India has to be imported for him to actually think over all such issues and bring in some kind of rational and sense. Otherwise, it's doing a lot of harm to him and to the Republicans and also to the population of America, because this is all, this is black ideology which is being allowed to pervade into the ambience of Americans, and which will destroy the spirit of supremacy of a superpower. Supremacy of superpower is actually rules-based international order. They are the ones who have created. They expect the whole world to follow that. It cannot happen like this. Judiciary must be left independent, autonomous. They must be allowed to exercise their mandate as it is prevailing in the court of law or in the American Constitution. That is all I feel as an analyst. And if they go further beyond this point, it will be actually doing a lot of damage to his reputation and the image of Republicans. Back to you, Pia.
All right, so with that, I'd like to thank you for taking our time sharing your perspective on these very crucial developments. On that note, viewers, we are shifting focus to East Asia. We're now learning that Taiwan has firmly rejected the idea of returning to China following comments by Chinese President Xi Jinping during a phone conversation with US President Donald Trump. She had insisted that Taiwan's integration into China, which he described as a key post-World War II objective, remains a vital part of Beijing's vision for the future world order. Taiwan's government, which is democratically elected, strongly opposed this view. Take a look.
中国屡次以威权扩张的本质，企图在区域对台湾以及日本等周边国家恫吓施压，这样子已经背离了联合国宪章所规定不得在国际关系中以威胁或者武力相向的国际法原则，以及以和平解决争端为核心的国际秩序。那我就先分述如下。首先呢，是针对于我国推动外交部要呼吁国际社会高度警觉，并且共同反制中国透过虚假不实的叙事以及所谓的法律战，来强化其台湾议题内政化的论据，企图为对台动武寻求虚假合法化的恶劣意图。
China has proposed a one-country, two-systems model for Taiwan, similar to that used in Hong Kong. However, this plan is not supported by any major political party in Taiwan. President Lai Ching-te has also rejected the idea, stressing upon Taiwan's sovereignty. This is the latest that we are tracking on the broadcast. Of course, earlier we'd seen this phone conversation within this morning itself between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping. Amongst a host of issues, Taiwan was of course the focal point. Other issues that were discussed include the war between Russia and Ukraine, the peace process and the efforts that the Trump administration is currently undertaking, fentanyl, soybeans as well. This was in fact their first phone conversation after their meeting that took place on the sidelines of the APEC summit in South Korea. With us on the broadcast is Mr. Mark Sutherland, geopolitical expert, joining us from London. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World. Fresh statements coming in from Taiwan. They've once again reasserted their independence, highlighting that they will never accept the idea of what the Chinese claim as a return to the mainland. They've asserted that they're a democratically elected government, that of course, and its people's aspiration is to remain independent of China. This phone conversation, of course, comes in the backdrop of Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi and her remarks on Taiwan, the fact that she stated that Japan could militarily intervene if China does use force to attack Taiwan. This is something that has not gone down well with the Chinese. They've, of course, held their ground. They've tested her as well. She's held hers as well. But how do you see this playing out? Is there a possibility of China to militarily sort of try to capture Taiwan? And what sort of message and sort of signaling do you think Beijing is now trying to send to Trump?
Good to be with you. The Chinese, again, continuing to flex their muscles, as we've always said, within the context of they want to be number one. They want to be, the hegemony is all about them. Remember, in that area, they have been building, basically producing islands so that they could get nearer and nearer and then circle and then reinforce the military tactics that they would want to put in place to then take Taiwan. It's very interesting what the Japanese Prime Minister has said, especially as Japan then is looking at economically what it is spending militarily and what it would then have to then step up to do. And of course, remember President Trump has just recently had a visit to Japan, so we're not privy to the conversations that go on behind the scenes, but Prime Minister of Japan is then saying supportive comments in regard to Donald Trump to then back him up in his conversations with the leader of China. We then have to go back historically of how Taiwan came about. And when the Chinese are saying, well, you know, two systems, one country, people then have to look at all the protests in regard to that over Hong Kong and then the clampdown on people then exercising democracy and they're exercising their free speech. That is then being clamped down in that region. So no wonder, it's understandable Taiwan are watching all of this extremely closely, and China is then hoping that that the world is diverted to look at other things. We now have there's a slowing down of certain events in between Gaza and Israel, after Hamas's attack on Israel on the 7th of October 2023. So where are the world's eyes going? The world's eyes also are then looking at Russia and Ukraine, as President Trump is now trying to push forward an end to hostilities there as well. Pia.
Absolutely. I request you to stay on with us, sir. We're tracking some other very crucial developments, this time from the United Kingdom. We're now learning that BBC Chair Samir Shah is facing a parliamentary grilling over the handling of a misleadingly edited speech by US President Donald Trump, acknowledging that the broadcaster should have responded quickly. Now, senior BBC leaders are being questioned by the UK Parliament's Culture, Media and Sport Committee amidst a major crisis at the publicly funded corporation after its Director General and Head of News both quit earlier this month. And Trump, of course, remember viewers, threatened to file a $5 billion lawsuit. The BBC drew Trump's ire and deep public scrutiny as well after an internal memo compiled by one of its former external advisors was leaked to the British press. The memo criticized cases of alleged biased reporting over a documentary on Trump that was aired days before the US 2024 presidential elections, as well as other BBC coverage, including its stance on issues regarding transgender individuals, Gaza and race. Let's have a look at what the former advisor to the BBC had to say.
And I do not think it's institutionally biased. Let's be very clear. Tons of stuff the BBC does is world class, both factual programming and non-factual programming. I was a political correspondent at the Daily Mirror, Sunday Times, other places for 14 years. I think the standard of BBC Westminster is exemplary. And that's why I keep saying these were incipient problems. We were finding the odd problem here, the odd problem there. And the crucial thing was, when I say odd problem here and there, every single thing we spotted, as per my memo, seemed to me to have systemic causes. And the root of my disagreement and slight concern even today is that the BBC was not, and I hope they will change, but will they, treating these as having systemic causes. There's real work that needs to be done at the BBC.
There, of course, we've heard what has been said. Interesting statements coming in. Of course, the Observer has had to say that BBC is not institutionally biased, but it does have a problem that needs to be addressed. What we've seen take place in the aftermath of the scandal coming to light is the fact that several presenters had doubled down on the documentary that was aired, despite the fact that two clips that were more than 50 minutes apart were spliced together to mislead viewers. In that context, some of the presenters, I'm not going to be taking their names, but they stated that this is an attack, a politically motivated attack on the public broadcasting system in the United Kingdom at large. Do you concur with the points that have been put forth, or do you think that the BBC should recalibrate, reassess the way it is reporting its coverage and reporting of certain issues in light of the fact that these revelations have come to light?
Without doubt. If you then go back to the first Trump administration and look at how some of the reporting comments that were made by the BBC then at that particular time, you would also conclude that. If you then look, in my humble opinion, and also at the BBC's views on climate change and man-made climate change and pushing all those issues as well. In regard to this, the editing of this speech, which seems to leave out 54 minutes, if you from one end to the other. What people have not faced over here, and it is not discussed, and yes, on a personal level, I have tried to have that discussion, is that after that speech, January the 6th, 2021, after many days after, instantly, many months after, a number of years after, 1,600 people were arrested. The whole events of that day and investigating that and then finding out there were over 200 FBI agents on the ground, also stirring and causing trouble to make it look that the patriots were then causing trouble on that day and having no understanding of the real events is a scandal. And that is what then contributes to all of this, because that is the huge backstory where 4 people died on that day at the hands of the police there, and 1 police officer was then died the following day after being neglected medically by his own side. That's a longer conversation that I'm more than prepared to have. And also on that day, the patriots were then accused of hitting a policeman with a fire extinguisher, hence why he died, which is not the reason why. Why am I saying this? Because this is absolute, this is vital, this is extremely serious and extremely important. And as we have just seen, especially with how, in my humble opinion, how the BBC then portrays the Gaza-Israeli war, and then will then say, a prescribed terrorist organization, there needs to be, if it's possible, a root and branch to go through the bias, and people also need to look at BBC Arabic, and that's another story as well. And also in regard to, just quickly, in regard to the UK going back, the other big event was the Brexit vote, the build up to that, and in my humble opinion, again, how things were skewed in regard to that debate, Pia.
Indeed, a lot of points that were put forth by people who were commenting on this scandal was the fact that freedom of press is important, but that's not a license to really sit and twist facts, but because what we've seen is a blatant violation of journalistic ethics. There was a statement that had come out in the aftermath of this coming to light. It was from the former UK Home and Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly. He branded what transpired as a failure of the BBC to recognize its own bias. He, of course, pointed out towards, the reportage of the war between Israel and Hamas. He's also pointed out that he tried to raise this issue with senior BBC management on numerous occasions, but nothing was really done. Is this then a wake-up call also for the British administration at large? Do you think some sort of an independent panel needs to be formed to probe how exactly the organization is functioning?
In an ideal world, that would be fantastic to have an independent panel, but I actually think that in many ways, I don't think there's much hope to actually then overhaul it root and branch way. And also then you have to then understand you have to understand the field here within the media, within the UK. And as far as I'm concerned, there is a left-wing progressive collectivist bias in other media, but people would say that I would say that because they would then know where I come from. But this is fundamentally important because. But let's just be blunt as well. We've just had an inquiry into regard to the COVID inquiry. That's another thing that the BBC and then other mainstream media need to look at, and how they conducted themselves. And also, if you look at in regard to COVID and the Great Barrington Declaration, how the mainstream media reacted to that. We have a war on for people's minds and people's opinion. And that is through propaganda in the news. And Pierre, you just raised a very, very important point. We have to report facts. We have to go to the truth. The problem is that op-eds have now, or that way of thinking, have now so invaded the mainstream media that it's taken so long for people to actually catch up and realize that. And there are still, in my humble opinion, many people that watch television or read something and take it at face value and say, well, it must be the truth because the BBC is saying it. Well, they need to question that severely and extremely quickly. That's why Mr. Prescott releasing the comments made about Israel have also been very, very, very important, because, like others as cleverly as said, they've taken their concerns to management. They've then said this has to be looked at. These people within the BBC at the top are paid a lot of money, and as far as I'm concerned, they then live in a bubble. And before anyone else, drama-wise, yes, I have worked for them. But the key is this: is then looking at this as a whole. People want the truth, and when they set up, and then there's a mindset where people turn around and say, "Oh, come to us for the truth." Well, it sounds like the Ministry of Truth of Orwell's 1984. And many people are questioning this. Many people are concerned about this, and the reason why is because you had Brexit, we've had COVID, we've then had Jan 6, 2021, and you're referring to Trump's speech, and also and also that's gone on over the last 2 years plus in regard to the reporting of the war that Hamas undertook with Israel. This is profoundly serious. But it's up to people to take this seriously. And as I would say to individuals, do your own research, do your own homework on all these subjects, because this is what is important, because the propaganda war is coming at us at full pelt. And the truth is important. And the truth is important in all these matters, Pierre.
Absolutely, it is important for truth to persist. With that, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Sutherland, for taking our time, of course, sharing your analysis, your perspective, and providing all of that context to our viewers. On that note, we're shifting focus away from the United Kingdom towards what's taking place in Thailand. We're now learning that severe flooding in southern Thailand has claimed 13 lives and has affected nearly 2 million people. Rising water since the weekend have hit 9 provinces, including Surat Thani, Nakhon Si Thammarat, Thang Pathalong, and Satun Songkhla, Pathani, Yala, and Narathiwat. Evacuations are currently underway in low-lying areas, including Hatay City, where rising waters prompted the deployment of military and rescue teams. Thai Prime Minister Anutin Charnvirakul has set up a forward command center in Songkhla, while Deputy Prime Minister Thammarat Prompao has ordered relief agencies to provide personnel, equipment, and aid to affected residents. Authorities, meanwhile, continue to warn of ongoing heavy rains. Well, viewers, that's all the time we have for, but due to paucity of time, we must wrap up this bulletin over here. Stay tuned on NewsX World for more such updates.